Hey everyone, welcome to the You Are Enough.life podcast. My name is Michael Lovett, as you probably already know. This is my buddy Josh Pacheco. And today on our episode here, we're coming to you live from Castle Rock Library, beautiful library. And we're going to celebrate our friendship, but more importantly, we're going to try to offer something of contentment, wisdom, whatever's on our hearts, so that maybe it would help you live your life a little more wholeheartedly, maybe find something that you're looking for, and hopefully just model an intergenerational friendship that we really enjoy. So hopefully you sense our joy in one another's friendship and what God is doing between us and among other people that are featured on this podcast. So today, welcome, Josh. What brings you to the show, and what are you hoping to explore a little bit today?
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate being here. I appreciate our friendship. Now friends for, a little over 2 years? That's pretty rad. What brings me here? Well, I am a writer, and I do really enjoy that. You've gotten a kick out of me producing out of that hobby. So the topics I've written about have featured in no small part in our conversations over the past 6 or 7 months. So that does bring me here in part. I am thinking at the moment about my most recent post. It was called All Is Well. If I remember correctly, I think you commented on it under the username P.Lovester.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that. Do you want to go into that now or later?
Whichever time.
Tell me about the comment and what was the impact on you? What are you sitting with?
Oh, I found it funny that you had remarked on the parable I used in the post. You said it made you feel overwhelmed. I found that kind of funny. And that you enjoyed, it was probably in the last paragraph, the part about our entitlement of planning for the future. You got a little kick out of that quote. But yeah, I was interested in as to what about that little story I used was overwhelming. Offering this, Josh, I love climbing in your thoughts with each essay. 2 things struck me. The idea of leaving a relationship despite all other signs of goodness, truth, and beauty in a relationship because working through differing views of having kids is overwhelming. And this quote, yet we may misconstrue planning and thinking about the future as a right, not a privilege, and in so doing we invite worry in. For now we are entitled to our view of the future. It said it got you chewing on this.
There you go. Yeah, when you were writing about a relationship ending because 2 people otherwise have a beautiful relationship, but then they disagree about having kids, I didn't want to make it small.
Yeah.
One wants to have kids and the other doesn't.
Exactly. And neither did I, by the way.
I was struck by the idea that somehow love couldn't conquer all, so maybe I'm really idealistic. And then right versus privilege. The privilege of, I think it was about the privilege of having everything turn out our way versus the right of having everything turn out our way. I think that's where you're going, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the overwhelm, it must be overwhelming to look at a relationship that is otherwise going really well. And there's one area, there's that one thing. There's always one thing. And that's something that I would say to anybody listening, there's always going to be one thing. There's always going to be something. It's like, oh.
Well, only.
Yeah, because we're marrying or relating to or dating someone that is so different from us. That's the rub. That's why it's hard, because in this illustration, one person really wants kids, the other person doesn't. But I kind of think, having had kids, that you think you don't want them, but then they disrupt your life in all the best ways.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe going deeper as to why maybe it becomes a path of divergence for the two people, but maybe it becomes a path of connection that would never have been possible if we just decided real early and real quickly, oh, you want kids, I don't want kids, let's just bag it. So I think what I'm landing on is it just really stimulated my thoughts about why does the younger generation possibly not lean in? Why might they possibly not persevere? Well, easy for me to say because I'm established. I've been married for over 20 years. And I'm sure throughout the ages, if a woman could not have children or if there was a difference of decision about having kids or not, I'm sure this is not just recent. Yeah. However, as an older person that's trying to create content for all different ages to consume and consider together, I think you bring up a fascinating point. What's our take on having kids as we come together dating? What's our take now that we've had kids if we're married? How do we handle kids once they start driving or once they leave for college? What is our relationship to one another in a couple relationship is always changing, but then our relationship to the kids that we might be having or adopting is always changing. And we have, in my opinion, the right and the privilege. It just really got me thinking, do younger people feel a right to control the outcomes? Do they feel it as an entitlement? Or do they experience the way life goes as really just a privilege to partner with God or partner with their significant other? To what extent does rights versus privileges play into friendships, romantic relationships, and then maybe in church community and in intergenerational connection? What do younger and older generations feel kind of like, this is my right?
Yeah.
Versus it's my privilege, it's my opportunity to relate, let's say, to younger or older people. So you got me thinking on a lot of levels. Knowing we would get together and talk, I was like, I love climbing inside your head. And so every time we get together, I want to record this.
Yeah. You got a lot of meat on that bone, man. I got a lot of thoughts.
I aim to please.
I'll at least catch the listener up, because I'm sure everyone reading this or everyone listening to this hasn't read what we're talking about.
Yeah. I will link it in the notes.
Link it in the notes, joshpacheco.substack.com, shameless plug. But this is the last couple paragraphs of All Is Well, my most recent post, though by the time this will go up, I will have a new most recent post. Yet we may misconstrue planning and thinking about the future as a right, not a privilege, and in so doing, we invite worry in. For now, we're entitled to our view of the future. We mustn't forget that making it to tomorrow is a belief, not a certainty. I'd imagine we'd hold our convictions on what tomorrow must bring with a little less fervor if we remembered this. For all the "you only live once" platitudes I've heard, I've observed a great deal of people who behave as though their days are unnumbered. Mm-hmm. I think in response to some of the questions you had, some of the thoughts you had, I don't think it's a specific to our generation thing about expecting a certain thing out of life, expecting that life should work a certain way. It depends on who you ask. It depends on the community around them. I think a lot of people that I've known, especially in church, people that have given them advice or have given them input have phrased this structure of input as kind of the answer to the unknowns of life. So in the example I used with your friend Carl and the person they're dating, I thought it really important in that parable to not be Carl. I wanted it to be like, you are giving advice to your friend Carl. I think we get, it's a little different. If someone's coming to you for help, how ought you to help them?
Okay.
Like, would you provide them with the advice, which I've heard, like, I think is reasonable, of like, well, you don't have the answer to the question, so it's probably best to just get out, right? Like, that would be most people's advice. But
In your experience with people of your age, that would be the advice. If it gets that hard that quick, just.
And as it pertains to Western Christianity trying to figure out a formula for dating, I've seen this come up a lot, because the example I used, it's derived from what happened to a friend of mine really recently. I just changed the name of the characters and I changed the problem.
Okay.
But it was a similar issue. They didn't have an answer to a question that I don't think really had implications on their relationship right now. But they worried about, like, what if we disagree on this in the future? What are we going to do? And unfortunately, they weren't even at a real commitment stage yet. They had gone on probably 6 or 7 dates and were enjoying each other's company. And the girl pulled the plug. She was just like, I just don't see this, working out. If we end up disagreeing on it and trying to figure it out, it'll feel like one person's dragging the other person through it. Well, I'm good. Fine. But it's just like what I was writing about. Like, I had never seen my buddy like that excited about something. Right? Like, he was telling me about all the things he was doing for her, stuff that he wouldn't do for me or for any of his roommates or for any of his friends, right? Like, but this particular person, because of where they had gotten in the relationship, she was bringing something out of him, a unique side of him that I had yet to see. And when he was asking me what he thought, what I thought he should do, that's what was like the impetus for writing all of this. Because I was like, I don't see what the big fuss is about.
And it was too late because she had already pulled the plug.
It hadn't happened yet.
Okay.
That was still to come. But at that moment, the question had been asked, and they were just kind of like still in the limbo of figuring it out. But no decision had been made for or against yet. And I was just like, all of the other stuff that you've told me is really good. And I would find it horribly lamentable if the two of you quit on this just because you don't have the answer to this yet. And yeah, right, like, ultimately it wasn't his choice. It was a choice of his counterpart to do that. Again, fine. I would hope that he derived a certain lesson from that about, like, choosing not to worry, and that may have alleviated him of a certain burden of the future. Again, this is where that entitlement of how the future should work out comes up. Because even in past relationships I had, in seeking input on where to go with them and stuff, it felt like a lot of the time we are building the formula so that all the answers are there, and you don't really have to take a risk when you're jumping into the commitment. And I think that sets up a false expectation, because, like, even in the relationship prior, a few years ago, I'm married now, but, a few years ago, I was in this a relationship, and, like, everything else looked great. There were a couple key concerns, but largely I was like, this should be fine. And it ended up not working out because, all of this stuff was good. But, us loving each other didn't triumph over the concerns.
Okay.
And I was really upset because
Rightfully so.
I felt I had been led to believe that, given the way that I had built things and the expectations that we had made and stuff, that, like, this should be surefire. And, I was pretty bummed and disappointed and angry. And I wish I could have told that version of myself that the risk was worth it and that all of the disappointment came from the expectations I had made of the future.
Okay.
Because I wouldn't go back and say, don't do that. I think I learned a lot from the experience. But
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of upheaval, a lot of disruption. And you were counting on it being surefire, and it was sure enough not surefire.
yeah,
Thus, the ticked off. Like, do you think that's a source of it? Is almost a betrayal? Like, hey, I thought reality went this way. Ugh, reality's going the other way.
yeah, exactly. And then you counter that to like me dating my now wife. Part of the reason I use that parable too is because it happened to me. It must have been 4 months into us dating. We were just watching a TV show at her place, nothing crazy. And this topic came up out of nowhere, talking about family and kids and stuff. I could not tell you how it came up. I just know it did. And I, at the time, was in Carl's position. I was like, I don't know. Especially being a single dude, like thinking about having kids is just so far out of your solar system. A version of me, maybe 18 or 19, dreamed about having a family one day, and it felt like that got undone over the preceding years to the point where I was at where I was at 2 years ago of like, having kids might be morally questionable. It might be morally dubious. Like all the stuff that you come up with, because you can come up with that as a single dude, right? Like nobody else is counting on you to have a meaningful opinion on that. Nobody cares.
Yeah. Nothing but time to think about the possibilities.
Exactly. So we get into this discussion. Julia, my wife, was very sure that she wanted to have kids.
Okay.
So yeah, I was in the boat of like not so sure. I wouldn't say we got into an argument about it. It was a light disagreement at best. But it did leave some tension in the air.
I bet it did.
Right? Because now she's like, I kind of have to think about this. And I'm jumping through the hoops in my head of like, we've been dating 4 months. Am I dying on it? Is this the hill I'm dying on? So, like I tell her like, I don't know, think about it, do your thing. But I think I had decided something along these lines of like, I'm not going to make up some expectation.
Okay.
I'm not going to say, this is the way that it has to be, and them's the breaks. I imagine that someone would have advised me, like, well, I mean, if you don't really know if you want to have kids and she's really sure about it, it seems like you have your answer there. You should probably just split up, let her have what she wants. I didn't really ask anybody for advice about it.
Okay.
But I felt like we patched it up. We were fine with not answering the question.
And that's what you're saying maybe some people aren't okay with.
Yeah, like because there's tension. There's a certain tension with both of you knowing that there's like an unanswered question in the background, but that you don't have the crystal ball to tell you this is where we're going to land. And that's in that tension is where all the good stuff is.
Okay.
That's where my theory, all my opinion, of course.
And was it your experience that the tension lingering from that 4-month in conversation about kids or not, did that tension bear fruit later?
Yeah.
Or are you still in the tension?
No, it did bear fruit because I think it helped me more fully develop where I was at. Wow. Why I was so dubious about whether I wanted to have children or not.
What did you learn about yourself from sitting with the tension? Because I think you're hitting something that maybe a lot of us don't have patience for.
Yeah. I learned that the place I was in was, I had seen a less than exemplary sets of parents
There you go.
throughout my early 20s. And my parents, as much as I love them, I wouldn't say also hit the mark of excellent parenting. I also wouldn't say that my standards are astronomical, but like,
Yeah.
you know, my parents are a whole other podcast episode for sure, or at least, the effects that my childhood had on me, being homeless from like the ages of 16 to 18, my parents being kind of religious fanatics, like, all of that had some very strong implications on how I would view having children later. That moment, like those moments and memories I shared with them throughout that time have stuck with me for years now, because I realized that like having kids wasn't going to be about me.
That's right. It's not. Yeah.
It wasn't going to be about what I got out of it, right? Like it was going to be about them. And it would be hugely impactful for me who my partner would be. Because if we partnered together, and I realized that like the two of us won't be able to find heaven on earth in the circumstance of having a child together, then I don't think I want one.
Right.
And
for the sake of the would-be child.
Yeah, for the sake of the child. So all of that stuff, like having this circumstance with my wife, helped me put together that whole, whoa, like this is the inner workings of the desire here.
The desire you had to either control your outcome or not have kids, or what?
I think the desire was in there to have kids.
Oh, okay. But it was under what? What was sitting on top of it?
It was under this, like, it'll just depend on who I'm with. And because I didn't have that variable, I had just kind of basically said, well, then I probably just don't want them. Because I didn't have the answer to this question yet.
Okay.
So, but since I hadn't really thought about it that deeply as a single dude, I was really just at that top level of like, I probably just don't want them.
Yeah. And it occurs to me that there's this tension now, because you got this great young lady in your life who wants kids, and you were telling yourself a story of, maybe it's not the best thing, or it's not on my radar. So now you risk losing a great relationship for a story that you're telling yourself. So I can appreciate the tension, right?
Yeah. I think I enjoyed the luxury of, at the time, I had been a Christian for practicing, like in seeking relationship with God for 8-ish years at that point. I enjoyed a certain level of maturity of like trying to keep my head level and not make every unknown this like world-shattering ordeal. I've certainly suffered from that in the past. It's happened to be in other relationships. And usually I would then seek advice as such. It was an emergency. And I felt it important to give this time, to give it that depth of like, we're going to talk and discuss and grow together. And if we involve other people's opinions, it'll be for the support of for the purpose of encouragement and exhortation. But
it will not be for what? Because I think this is important to disambiguate. When do you go to people in your community, especially if you're a Christian, for advice, and when do you not? Like, what are you filtering for, and what are you filtering out?
I think,
based on your experience, what was your mindset, if you had gone to someone, what would you have been very aware of
Yeah.
taking and not taking?
Yeah, I think Julia and I could be the only two people who would make a decision on us. Right? So people trying to give advice on what decisions we should make on us was, for us, kind of like a no-fly zone. Like it just, there's no, it's us too. We have to figure things out and come to conclusions together, or leave things without answers together if we choose that, like we can't answer something right now. Because we dealt with that a lot, especially on my end. Depending on the audience here, listeners may or may not know, but the Churches of Christ organization depend a bit on this like plan of salvation, Bible study work and stuff like that, which I've never defamed. I always think it's cool, I think it's a way of spreading the gospel and trying to teach people what the gospel is. My wife didn't come from that whole group of things. So, I had certain views on this whole doctrinal thing, and I think we lined up pretty close on it. Certain things we didn't have answers for.
Fair enough.
And that was really important for me, that like, this is not something, hey, Joe Schmo, what do you think of this? What should I tell her? How should I deal with it? Like, that was going to have to be something the two of us deal with together. Nobody else could tell me, well, she has to make her mind up about this, and if she doesn't, then you call it, right?
Which, even if someone had said that, you could have said, well, thank you for your time and opinion.
Yeah.
I will go forth and do what I see as best. I'm very interested in you walking this out, because we're ostensibly on a podcast about wisdom and contentment. Well, here we're talking about wisdom, but I think we're also talking about contentment, because you were content with letting it be in-house. Mm-hmm. The wisdom is it sounds like you're saying, to let God reveal what might happen and to be flexible enough to let it happen, rather than asking another outside person, another human being that's prone to error, for their decision-making in your relationship. Like, wisdom is one thing, but control masked as advice is not something you're open to, and creating a precedent where a lot of cooks get in the kitchen, it sounds to me like you're saying that was not something you're up for. And so as I'm sitting here listening to your story, I'm thinking, wow, Josh has a high tolerance for nuance, for tension, for not a lot of answers right now. And I'm wondering, where does that come from? Is that because you were just so infatuated with Julia? Is that because of your upbringing with your parents? Is that because of a combination of all of the above? Where does that come from? And do you think that your way, the way you did that relationship, is that relatively common in your generation? Do you think there's something of a disenchantment with outsiders getting in to relationships?
Yeah.
So I said a lot there. I think my question is, how did you become the kind of person that could handle this unique situation? A, you're dating outside of your denomination. Let's just call it that. B, you come to an impasse of sorts where you want two different things, you think, about children.
Sure.
How do you become the kind of person that can hold that nuance? I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
And I'm with you on the Church of Christ culture may not always be welcoming of someone that can hold that much ambiguity.
Yeah.
I just wonder,
that's a good way to put it.
Have you thought about that? Like how you became the kind of person that could A, date Julia, B, hold a really big thing like kids or no kids in dating that most people would say, that's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think might be the story under that?
Yeah, that's a great question and great phrasing. I appreciate you working through it in such a way. I think I've reached certain crisis points in my life, places where I said, if I'm going to keep doing this, I have to figure out a new way of doing it. Like a really big one for me was in 2020. I can put it so verbosely now, but I couldn't have when I was 20 years old.
Okay.
That at that time, I discovered that the primary motivating factor of my faith was guilt.
That's huge.
And I reached this impasse of, I don't think not being a Christian was on the line, but truly, like, if I'm going to keep being a Christian, I can't do it for this. I had reached this place where I realized I was getting nothing out of it anymore. Out of the practice of going to church and maintaining relationships and stuff, maintaining appearances, for the sake of serving this like moral anxiety I had all the time of, am I doing the right or wrong thing? It was the burning question on my mind at any given moment. I made myself suffer a lot for that, for seemingly no reason. But yeah, I did. I carried this heavy sense of like, everything I have to do has to be defensible.
To whom?
I thought it was to God. I realized that it was a lot more about people, like, especially because of how much, I wouldn't say it's a Church of Christ thing, just like churches in general stress the, like, who are you in discipleship with? Who's hanging out with you? Who are you hanging out with? There is this like constant stage play to it all, enter stage right, exit stage left, the props, the plot,
So
the
that's to
decision
say
making.
there's some hypocrisy because we're playing a role we're not living out in our total integrity yet.
Yeah, just like so much of what I was doing was fueled by this, like, is what I'm doing defensibly right or not? Yeah, it was just all ever present. So guilt was the first public enemy number one.
Okay.
For sure, around that time. And then it was a few years later in graduating from college, starting to transition into adulthood, even though you're technically already an adult in college, but certainly aren't treated like it. I graduated, and then, I don't know, engaging with community up until that point had been this largely, like, especially since I worked for the church, it was just part of my schedule, right? Like, it didn't cost me much to be present at events, to go to things. And I mean, even my last semester of college, that started changing. I left ministry. I got an internship at Disney. I had a full load of classes. Like, I was already kind of like starting to feel the tug of like, what is valuable time-wise to go to. And then, I graduated, I finished that internship, I got a full-time job, and I was going through the motions of just doing church. And it was probably like end of 2022, I was starting to get really dissatisfied with that because I felt I was showing up every Sunday to hear a different iteration of the same lesson every week.
It was what shifted? Because now you weren't thinking about your anxious guilt. You were dissatisfied with what? What was the new kind of category that seemed to be the preoccupation?
I think I was dissatisfied because now I started owning that, like, I'm going in a direction. Like, even though I couldn't have told you at that time, like, this is the direction I'm going in, but like end of 2022, I split from my roommates that I'd been living with for, at that point, 3 years. And through a connection, a web of friends that led me to a certain couple that lived northeast of Orlando in a town called Oviedo. They had a tiny home, a little house on wheels, and they were like, hey, if you want to rent it for a few months, feel free to. And I was like, I was morbidly afraid, horribly afraid of the idea of living alone because I'd never done it before. And because I think what our, Christian church culture has a certain view of men and what they do by themselves.
Yeah, that's true.
So I had a fear, and it was probably, I would say, the first time in my life that I leaned into the direction of fear instead of away from it.
I was going to say, it sounds like an initiation.
Yeah, and it was initiated by me, prayerfully. I thought the opportunity was from God, and I followed it as such.
Okay.
I thought it was an opportunity that God was putting at my feet to say, here is something you don't have experience with, an opportunity to grow. If you want to take it, take it. Because I could have just as easily kept living with my roommates. We were just going to move to a different spot. But something about it felt valuable to me, about I've never lived by myself. There's a lot of fear around this particular topic when it comes to men in Christian church. So I just wanted to go for it. And that, I felt like, was setting me off on a direction. And it came in tandem with this realization of what am I attending here? What are we? I show up to this, none of us talk, one person talks from, an elevated platform. And we all have this shared agreement that person is kind of talking to a theory of a person in the room. The lowest common denominator that Joe Schmo, who doesn't know anything about God or Christianity or religion, walks in through the doors. This sermon's for them. It rung all too true throughout Sundays and stuff and Bible talks as I went along through those preceding weeks, was that I want to talk about God with people, and I'm not doing that at the place that we're supposed to be talking about God.
So on Sundays, you were listening about God, and at your small group, what was happening there that it just didn't jive with your needs? Was it not about God, or was it not enough people talking, or was it?
To me,
what was
at the time,
miss?
It wasn't about God, right? For the name of the thing being Bible talk, we were talking remarkably little about the Bible.
What did you find took up a lot of the conversation?
I mean, pleas for being vulnerable. We talk about podcasts and books and stuff. But yeah, it was all with this tinge of being vulnerable, talking about ourselves. And look, there's a space for that. Like I said, me talking in this way because I talk very passionately about things that I believe in.
Sure.
Even though they are my opinions and not facts. But I was I honestly don't want to hear about any of y'all.
Okay.
Which sounds selfish, but I wanted to talk about God. I wanted to marvel at the collection of circumstances God was creating in each of our little pockets of lives. So it's put wrongly to say that I didn't want to hear about other people's lives. I just wasn't hearing where God was factoring in to their lives. I'm hearing a lot about work is fine.
Yeah.
I hate work, or X, Y, or Z, but I'm not hearing God is doing this.
Right. And so there, you found yourself in a time of initiation of moving away and finding your own strength on your own. And at the same time, you found that the place where you should gather and marvel at God was a place where people gathered and talked more about themselves than about God in themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to phrase it. And that the dissonance between the two directions was what was becoming more and more difficult to tolerate. We're especially once I did move into the tiny house, because I didn't have this crowd of voices around my life and behavior all the time, it produced this like remarkable freedom in my personal relationship with God. And I found all of these quiet moments between me and God that nobody will ever know about. Moments where I got to marvel at life, look at a lake, read a book, look at birds, like listen to bird song by myself, like play music, like all of these really remarkable moments. And yeah, as I kept feeding into community, I didn't find that sense of that marveling, in my conversations with people. Everything just seemed rather mundane.
Fair enough.
And I felt like the track I was going on was illuminating this part of life that was far less mundane and far more holy. And not that those two are opposed to each other. There is holiness and mundanity. But yeah, I think the holiness was redeeming mundanity, and I wasn't seeing that in the regular Sunday gatherings, or it's just like the regular song and dance of it all. So to trace the line there of like where we are here, the guilt thing was really imperative, because I wouldn't have been able to ask the questions I did about why I practiced my faith and community the way I did if I hadn't answered the question about guilt first.
Okay. Had a cough. The spiritual discipline we're lacking is, what do you think?
We're stuck in worry?
Yeah, we're stuck in worry. We keep coming back to it. We want something we cannot currently have. What are we lacking spiritually?
Self-control.
Okay.
Or faith.
Okay. And it's probably not so likely that we could get a real, authentic, good and true and beautiful faith from processing all that worry all the time with other people.
Yeah. And trying to get the answers to it. Right?
Maybe their stories will help, but their control, their advice isn't gonna.
Yeah, and that's why I caution against like your first instinct when there's a question unanswered is to gather a council of thinkers and let's answer it, right? Like,
right.
There's a place for that, surely.
So you're saying we have to let go of the insistence on answers. It's almost like we're idolizing answers in resolution to our current discomfort.
Certainty is a great idol. It is, but it is one of our own making.
It's huge. Well, I really appreciate the time with you, Josh. I'm wondering if you could close us with a little bit of advice to the person that feels. I have two directions here. One is advice that you're getting right now, maybe one piece of advice or one category you're looking for advice from the older generation from. But I'm also curious, we're recording this and trying to add it to a series about feeling behind. What I heard in your story, and you can sign off on this or tune it up, according to the culture of the group that you were part of, and according to your story you were telling yourself about what a good Christian is, you felt behind. You felt chronically guilty of not being good enough, so therefore behind. Does that resonate? Is that a fair characterization of your early stages of Christianity? Did you feel kind of behind or not enough?
Yeah,
Were you
certainly.
comparing to other people or to some caricature
Certainly.
of what a Christian is or does or knows or understands?
Yeah, definitely. And the quote I said earlier, I wish I would have heard earlier.
Okay.
That to have the desire and the purposeful seeking of something because you're afraid you're missing it might mean you've found it.
Awesome. And lastly, just by way of closing on an intergenerational podcast, what are some of the questions you're bringing to older people or to mentors? What are some areas you want advice on or that you're currently getting mentoring on as a newly married mid-ish 20-year-old person in the 21st century, what are you looking for? What questions are you asking lately?
I mean, right now, I have been asking a lot of questions of my writing. It's a pursuit I hadn't taken seriously for a few years. I started writing when I was living at the tiny house. That was where I started my first blog. And I didn't have any conception of what I wanted it to be. I wasn't advertising it. Like, nobody could find it unless I told them, hey, read this if you want, and I texted them the link.
Sure.
So now I started a Substack in October or November. I've been posting on it monthly. And the question has been, at least consistently now, of like, how do I continue to take this seriously? How do I continue to ask God for this to grow and influence and to end up in front of more people, not for the sake of vanity, for the sake of, look how many people are reading the stuff I'm writing, but because I think there's something encouraging here. I think there's something that could be useful for the distressed seeker, for someone with a lot of questions and just wants to find answers, and they won't find any answers in my writing. But I hope it could lead them to reinterpret the story, like I had said in All Is Well. Like I used that little parable of Carl and Jenny because I wanted to emphasize how important our interpretation of experience is. We choose how to tell the story. But yeah, all that said, that's the question I'm asking right now, is just like, what's the next step in evolving my writing? I want to start a new writing series. So yeah, getting some advice on creativity. But largely, life is good.
That's great.
All is well. All is well.
Well, Josh Pacheco, thanks for being on the show. Thank you all for hanging in there. Very grateful to have you on the show, and very grateful to have you as a friend. So
yeah,
with that, we're signing off.
Yeah, thanks for having me.